Tonight's presenter is Mr. Joe Hall. Joe's been flying powered paragliders for more than 10 years, and he's been a U.S. Powered Paragliding Association flight instructor for more than 6 years now. Joe trained in California and Kansas with the U.S. Powered Paragliding co-founders. Joe's the owner of AirX PPG at Donegal Springs Air Park. That's November 71 in Pennsylvania. And he's serving his 6th year as an FAA safety team and wings IT specialist. He's also a fast team rep. Joe is GA liaison for the U.S. Powered Paragliding Association and the FAA. Joe retired from decades of service as a senior corporate executive in the healthcare and information technology sector. And what do you do, Joe, now? You enjoy your time flying around?
Yeah, I fly, and I'm a musician, so I still play music. So,
And we're happy to have you with us tonight. We really enjoy your presentations. You're here to share with all of us your passion, powered paragliding. With that, I'm going to hand the presentation over to you. You have the controls, and I'm going to stop sharing.
all
And I'm
right.
going to go
Thanks
dark.
everyone for being here, and thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a blessing to be here. We're good?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I understand I am not the headliner tonight. I'm the opening act. I know that there's a couple of other people that are going to take the mic here in a couple of hours that are probably much more nervous than I am. I don't know why I would be nervous presenting to this group, but I am. So pardon me if I go a little fast. Tonight's presentation, we're going to cover actually, I've got it reversed. It's actually the rewards and the risks. But those of you familiar with the sport are familiar with that saying, risk and rewards. But we're going to start by talking about rewards, typical sorties. We're going to talk about the basics of paramotor cross-country flights. We're going to talk about a personal challenge, right, for a cross-country experience. And this is out in the Hawaiian Islands. And we're going to talk about a corporate challenge, which is a sponsored cross-country challenge. And lastly, we're going to talk about a recent accomplishment with who I'm going to refer to as Tres Amigos for the three brothers of going border to border from Mexico to Canada. And following that, we're going to do a somewhat of a deep dive into a recent accident, near fatal accident that occurred in Texas with an individual by the name of Anthony Vila. We're going to talk about Anthony's experience. And if there's time left, we'll have a little Q&A. So contrasting the type of sorties that we typically have in paramotor, both of the flight maps you see displayed are originating out of the same November 71 out of Donegal Springs Air Park. The difference between the sortie on the left and the one on the right is purely predicated on wind. With the wind coming out of the north, the sortie on the left meant that I left Donegal Springs, flew to the north for 30 minutes, and then turned around and flew back. The sortie, the flight on the right, is a no wind day where you pretty much are free to go and explore wherever you want without the wind pushing you or preventing you from returning or going into a given direction. And then the statistics for a particular flight would look something like this. Again, for the older folks, we don't stay in the air as long. You know, for me, an hour is typically satisfying. My longest flights are in the 2.5 hour range. And I think maybe 55, 60 miles is the greatest that I've covered. And I say that just for context as we look at some of these other off-field accomplishments. And you see with this one, you know, three miles distance from the airport. It's not uncommon to stay within 7 to 10 miles of your airfield. Again, if you're originating and ending the flight at the same location. So in terms of our cross-country endeavors, land versus air, I wanted to talk about a couple of land cross countries and just start off with a contextual. When I was a kid, I packed up a motorcycle in San Diego and I loaded up just like these photographs here in front of us, these bikes here in front of us. And I rode that bike from San Diego up through the route that these guys are going to take on this trip tonight, up through Utah and Nevada and so forth. and everything I could strap on to the bike was fine. I didn't have to worry about distribution, balance, not really. I pretty much if it could strap onto the bike, I could ride it. Another form of loading that we see on the bikes and automobiles where people just pile everything that they can on and they go and they have a good time and they enjoy it. And this second photograph is what I see throughout, Southeast Asia, Singapore, Philippines, etc. And we get over here and we start looking at the essential items that we're putting together a list of what do we leave home and what do we take with us. Well, if we're going on a paramotor cross country, for sure you've got to have your fuel oil, the two-stroke racing oil synthetic uh, uh, mix, if you will. You have to have communications for your co-pilots and a rescue option. You have to have tools, repair materials, common replacement parts. You have to have water, food, and maybe supplements, and then protection from the elements, rain and cold. And of course, you need lighting because if you're, out in the middle of the desert and it's dark, you need to see what you're doing. Um, Unlike the motorcycle packing, when we're packing up for the paramotor, we have considerations of the limits of the aircraft, specifically, especially if we're launching in elevated areas. We have density altitude to deal with. We have maximum weights that these engines can carry. The Vitarazi 185 Moster engine, I want to say the thrust is typically capped at around 175 for that, 175 pounds. So, you start thinking about a 190-pound pilot and a 60-pound paramotor and 20 pounds of fuel and 100 pounds of gear. You're thinking about lifting a lot off the ground. And so, as I was telling Gary and Rick earlier, in my IT days, I used to consult with people about backup solutions, and I use this actual slide from Forrest Gump and a number of my presentations, and I point to this location here and say to the customer, "How far are you willing to go? How far are you willing to go out in the desert without backing up your systems? How much are you willing to work to recover it?" And it's so much more critical in flying that you're going to literally fly out into this desert. Your gear has to be spot on, and you have to be emotionally, physically, technically equipped, and ready. I mean, we know that pilot attitude makes all the difference in the world. Um, in terms of giving you the tech data, I know there's always some gearheads on our calls. So I wanted to take just a couple of minutes, and this is in the context of the cross country, and show you a typical glider tech spec, and with a focus on the minimum and maximum speeds. And what you'll notice if you disregard the overall tech data, these are in the sizes of the gliders. One thing you'll see is that the cells remain the same and the speed remains the same. So whether you're flying with a 31 meter XXL or an 18 meter XXS, you're still going to be capped out at 41 miles per hour. So the size of the glider is not going to impact the speed. It's the design and the cells of the glider. So I wanted to just take a moment and share that with you, and then add when we're sitting down, whether it's tonight to plan for tomorrow's activities or whether it's tomorrow morning when we're getting ready to go and we're verifying the assumptions from the previous night. What we have to explore and assess and contrast are the wind velocity at various elevations, as well as the wind direction. So, if you're looking to fly, to the west, right, on this day, you're going to be going at 250. You're going to be going right into the wind, right? So you might go out 30 minutes to the west and turn around and be back in 10 or 5 even. So planning, because of the low speed that we have, the cross country, the successful cross country pilots plan accordingly to use the winds at upper elevation. And you'll typically see the XC guys in this range, in the 10K range, flying along with a 30-mile-an-hour, hopefully tailwind, fully trimmed out, and achieving somewhere around 70 miles an hour is not at all uncommon. So the dream versus the reality. Okay, this is what the dream of when people come to me and they want to sign up for paramotor and yeah, I want to take my family and go camping with it. Well, that's the dream. This is the reality. Okay, so that slide on the left is actually one of the slides from this trip, and the slide on the right is showing the 100+ pounds of packing in the bag that goes into the front loading on this given pilot. So I'm going to look at three different cross countries in tonight's presentation. And the first one is going to be with Major Zach Watkins. And Major Zach Watkins is an Army officer. And I've known Zach for a year or so now. He was actually the winner of last year's corporate race, which was a cross country sponsored by Scout. And if you guys were on that presentation, you'll remember Zach's the pilot who fell on his first launch, took a silver dollar sized divot out of his left knee, I believe it was, got up and flew the entire day to an ER at the end of the day, managed to get himself patched up, and then went out and flew another 4 days. And like I said, he won the competition. So in Zach's challenge, he's out in the Hawaiian Islands, and he's an adventure guy. Zach decides he's going to fly a route that has never been flown before. He's going to fly across the open ocean from the south shore of Honolulu out over to the south shore of Maui. He's got a 30-mile open ocean crossing at one point. He has complex airspace with Honolulu Class B extending out off of the all sides of the islands, and so which meant he had to leave the island at or below 4K, and then as soon as he cleared, he had to climb immediately to 10K to get to cruising altitude, so that if he had an engine out at his halfway point here, that he has sufficient glide to get back to either Molokai or Oahu. So think about it for a second. You look at the slide. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in the islands. I love Hawaii. I've flown to all these islands on inter-island air. It's no big deal. You go to the airport, you get in, and they take you right to the next airport. It's a 20-minute flight, and it's very convenient. But for Zach to get the moxie and say, I want to take off from Sandy Beach down here on the South Shore and fly all the way over here to Maui. And I'm going to encourage you guys to look Zach Watkins up at Zach Watkins on YouTube, and not now, and watch his flight over to Maui. When he gets over there, it's gusting 30 miles an hour. So he lands literally in a backward motion. And then when he takes off, he's kind of throwing himself into a 30-mile-an-hour gust. Amazing skills, amazing planning on his part. And in summary, the data over shows that he was fighting headwinds. I think he said he had 20-mile-an-hour headwinds, crosswind going over. So it took him 3 hours, 25 minutes, and it took an extra 20 miles. It's an 80-mile straight line, but due to the crabbing, it added 20% to the route. He had an average ground speed of approximately 30 miles an hour, 14.5 liters at 4.25 per hour, climbed over 19,000 feet, and fully extended the glider for 80% of the flight. Return, however, it tells a different story. It's a third less because he's got tailwind now. So 90 miles instead of 100, 2 hours instead of 3.5. His ground speed goes to 43 from 29. He goes down from 14.5 to 9.5, a third less fuel. He's still burning fuel, but he's just going faster, and he doesn't have as much climb. So I actually reached out to Zach last week and asked if he's cool with us talking about his adventures, and of course he's totally fine with it, and glad to be a part of our program here. So the next one I'm going to look at is the Scout Paramotors Wingman Challenge. Okay. And this is what I would call a corporate sponsored challenge. Okay. It is a challenging course. It's an 1,100-mile course. The difference, major differences here are that the Scout Wingman Challenge, there's probably 15 people that participate in this. So you have a large group of pilots. So it's very, how would I say, collegiate, familial. Everybody is encouraging one another. There's no prize. The prize is you're the winner and you have bragging rights, but everybody's humble about that. So really, the fun is let's all get there and get there together. So it's a 2-week period that they fly this course. And as I said, the focus is on fun and fellowship and precision. There are mandatory rest days on this. So you have to stop and enjoy the scenery and enjoy some of the activities along the way. So it's not just a push, push, push. The detail in the small print here that is relieving to those we leave at home. And that is there's a truckload of parts following these guys. They have a capable mechanic in tow. So you've got parts and the mechanic. They have satellite comms to pinpoint locations. They have extraction and retrieval services. Your progress is actively monitored. So yes, I mean, this is not something that as a 60-plus-year-old man that I would want to go take off on and see if I could handle this. But for the young pilot that has the endurance and the physical capacity, I would be totally all over this. Yeah, go do this. If something happens, you're covered, right? You're going to be okay. Conversely, as we go to our last cross country, and this is what I call the Tres Amigos flight. This is comprised of Mark Honeycutt, Chuck Edwall, and Caleb Johnson. And as I was telling Rick and Gary earlier, these guys I'm referring to as the Lindbergh, Earhart, and Yeager of today's crew. And I say that in all sincerity. I mean, I've sat here and thought this through. How would I describe these guys? Well, you know what? They went into the unknown. They flew up into the desert without any support, no comms. They had comms between themselves, but they weren't on satellite. They did not have an extraction plan. They only had the parts and tools that they could carry with them and a maximum of 5 gallons of fuel per each sortie or per each leg and limited food and water. So they took a northbound route and they started out here at Calexico Airport. And it's actually called Calexico International Airport, if you can believe that. And it's literally a stone's throw from the border there in Mexico and Calexico, California. So you can, actually just walk right there and put your foot on Mexico. It's that close. But they did launch in California. Then they flew up through Arizona, Nevada, Utah, Idaho, Montana, and then ending up in Canada. So I have so much respect and admiration for these guys. I don't know Chuck and Caleb as I know Mark. I know Mark from flying with him back in Carolina when he first started flying. And we've been in a couple of classes over the years together. He's a super, super human being. And you look at some of his video collateral. He went to duty station in Korea, in South Korea, and he became an expert paraglider. And he has a video flying off the top of a mountain to the center of the city, packing up the paraglider and walking into a sushi bar and having sushi after landing literally right outside of the sushi bar. He's quite a character and nothing outlandish or sensational about him. He's a very humble, mellow guy, super guy. So this is a once-in-a-lifetime journey with extraordinary photographic opportunities. These guys are shooting 4K res, going 30 to 40 miles an hour at 3 to 6K AGL across some of the most beautiful, beautiful terrain that the United States has to offer. And as I said in the earlier slide, the dream was achieved, but the reality looks a lot like this. Okay. Whereas, yeah, we were lucky enough to get to a place that had a room available that we could get all of our gear into and that we could all get some sleep and rest. But actually, it looks a lot like this as well. This is where one of the guys had worked all the way through the night on repairing one of the paramotors and just grabbed a slice of shade to crash out the following morning. So each leg has to be planned for the refueling. And again, going back to my motorcycle trip when I was flying or driving up through 15 through Utah and Nevada, it was 100 miles and with nothing. And my gas tank was 100 miles. So I'd be on reserve to get to that next gas station. Well, these guys literally had to fly their paramotor to a gas station. Or if they can't, they have to carry their bladder. They have a 2-gallon bladder that they'll carry over and fill that and walk back and forth. But this is the optimum right here in either of these pictures. And I was telling Rick earlier, there's an old black and white movie called Streetcar Named Desire. And if any of you guys are old enough to remember that, the femme fatale in that, Blanche, says, "I've always relied upon the kindness of strangers." And that just resonated with me in the context of this slide here. Right? How many times have we been broken down somewhere and a stranger helped us out with our plane? In this case with Caleb, he had a launch mishap where he was struggling with gusts and he ended up taking a spill, and it took out a quarter of his airplane hoop. 1/4 of it is missing right here. And you know, if I were sitting in Caleb's place right here, I'd probably be thinking, okay, this is where I go home, right? That you can't fly the paramotor without the hoop. It's not safe. It's time to go home. You can't, or call FedEx. But they find a guy, the kindness of strangers, who happens to have fiberglass, resin, and catalyst, and he knows how to mix it up just at the specific scientific measures appropriate for this elevation and today's heat and humidity to put the airplane back together. And that's exactly what this gentleman did for these guys. And instead of dropping out, Caleb is, the beneficiary of this repair job and off on the next leg of the trip. So we had a couple of, I think was this Lake Mead or Lake Powell, Rick? You guys had that identified. Rick's away from the mic. It's
Powell.
Lake Powell. So that's Lake Powell up in Nevada.
Yeah, I guess I need to turn the microphone on.
That's okay. And again, the Colorado River, some of the desert scenery. And with this is one of our last slides on the border to border. We'll tell you guys of the URLs for the film. I highly encourage you guys to take time and watch. Mark has a 3-part series on this trip, and it's absolutely stunning in terms of the visual. And Mark's narrative, again, is not. It's like a typical airline pilot announcing scenery along the trip. He's just very professional, very calm. It's not sensationalistic at all. Very easy to watch. And this slide down here in the lower right, Mark is cruising along at about 7,500 feet. He runs out of gas, and he's talking. He's okay. I've run out of gas. I've got to switch over to my bladder and pump some fuel in. Uh-oh! I squeezed the primer bulb, and it's not coming back. So that tells me my line is crimped. Okay, so what do we do if the line's crimped? Well, we got to get the crimp out. So for 99.999% of us mortals, what we're going to do is we're going to land and we're going to troubleshoot our issue, and then we'll resolve it and go fly again. Well, what Mark does is Mark manages to turn himself around in the seat in flight. And this is all on the film. He's narrating this whole thing, and he's looking down in the engine. He's killed it, obviously, because he doesn't want to be working on the spinning prop, and he's out of gas. So he manages to clear the crimp, but he can't get the fuel to go back in, and that cost him probably 4,000 feet. So he goes down. He's probably 3,500 when he makes up his mind. I'm going to go ahead and land, and he does. He lands right here next to the complex, and Caleb and Chuck are filming at that point. Him on the ground, going through his troubleshooting. He's not on the ground 5 minutes. Then he's got it fixed and off and running again. So my hats are off to Mark he's a phenomenal guy. And to be able to do that under pressure, absolutely amazing. I have a just a couple more shots of the scenery. Here's where you had a sun country. It looks like can somebody identify that for me? Gary, Rick, is that going to be a Airbus or is that a 700 series? But you got a sun country jet coming underneath them. Any guesses on the plane model?
If anybody wants to write it in, please do so on the Q&A.
Okay. So a couple of the tactical along the way. Um, these guys are putting up Facebook posts and Instagram posts at night. Friends along the way are following their journey. They managed on a couple of occasions to have pilots meet them on the ground, do a Costco run, and they're actually having steak and eating by a campfire. And at one point, there was a camper with warm shower in it for them, and so they were able to get good refreshing time. On the other hand, the reality is much more like this. You stop at that Chevron station, you grab whatever wrap they've got in the container and stuff that in your bag, and then once you're at cruising altitude, you pop that bad boy out and scarf on it. And look at Mark's flight deck and his cruising view, if you will. So he's got his phone out, he's got all of his flight data handy. Mark is also using a solar panel in flight for recharging or for keeping his devices powered up and running, which is pretty cool. You think if they're camping out in the desert, how are they going to be recharging their phones and radios? And then lastly, on Mark here, we have his gear bag open, his hydration clearly visible. He's on full speed bar. And what is that yellow on his right foot? Can anybody, you may chime in with what that is? You may know what the yellow thing is on his foot? Rick, you get any response on that?
Nobody's typing in yet, but I think I know what it is.
Well, if we have any military pilots going to know what that is. There's a name for it, right? And like an M1 or something.
Robert is saying it's a urine tube.
That's exactly what it is. He has a condom catheter that is fixed onto the business end of things, and that's the other end. And while the other there's one shot where Caleb is standing up in his harness, right? He's literally come out of his seat and he's got his pants unzipped and he's trying to go, and that just doesn't work, right? Was it that Jim Croce said you don't spit into the wind? Well, you don't pee in the wind either. So I tried that once. You can't do it. So the other guys were having to land or hold it, but Mark was a smart one. He had the tube catheter. So coming in around to the finish line, these guys did 1,300 miles in 8 days. They did a full crossing of the United States from the border of California and Mexico to the border of Canada and the United States and Montana. So again, you think about, well, the guys that go out there and hike the Appalachian Trail, they're real explorers, they're real adventurers. I think this is on par with the folks who get in the boats and go out and sail, across open ocean on their own with no support. I mean, you are completely helpless and at the mercy of the wind and weather and these circumstances. So I can't say how much I respect these guys and their capability and their accomplishment. So with that, I'm going to step off into the accident review. So that's the reward side of the sport. And again, none of these guys have been flying more than 10 years. I remember when Mark came for training. So it's probably been 8 years that Mark has been flying. So these accomplishments are certainly within grasp of those listening to today's call. So now we're going to talk about another friend, and his name is Anthony Vila. And Anthony, you look at this picture here of him, he looks like a superhero, right? He looks like a Marvel comic hero or something you're going to see come off the screen, with an AR in one hand and a bazooka in the other. And that's who he is. I mean, Anthony is he is a combat medic. He is medically discharged from the United States Army, and he has seen combat in the Middle East theater. And I'll just leave his background at that. And also add that he is, for the last 10 years, he's been an active YouTuber and filmmaker. And he is an incredible paramotor pilot. He has amazing skills and tons of content. He is also a husband and father. And when you get to know Anthony, you'll find that Anthony is extremely authentic. He is highly engaging and very entertaining to watch. He's very sincere. His presentation style and mode just draw you in. He's an awesome human being. I really like him a lot. And so here's a couple of examples of Anthony's social media. Okay, it's his YouTube and Instagram. So again, when you drop into this fellow's channel, both he and Mark have been making videos for a decade. So you'll find videos of them looking like high school age, youngsters. So on April 28th of this year, while testing a BGD, that stands for Bruce Goldsmith Designs, BGD Luna 3, which is an advanced paraglider, Anthony experienced a full collapse of the system. This occurred approximately 85 feet above ground level while traveling at an estimated 50 plus miles per hour. And the time from his collapse to impact is approximately 3 seconds. And this was, as you saw, as I'm introing Anthony, and you're seeing these news stories, they're from around the world. This Anthony's crash made headline news internationally. And I would caution you guys, for those of you that haven't seen this, it's readily available if you go to YouTube and you just look on Anthony Vila accident, that I would encourage you to mute the audio if you're going to watch it, because the audio you cannot unhear. And it's literally blood curdling. And that's, in my opinion, the amount of video that they had combined with the audio is what brought the international community to this. It's very, very heartbreaking, heart-wrenching, if you will. So be careful if you go to watch that. So his test objectives, Anthony was looking to accelerate this glider. It was a loaner, and he was attempting to push it to its full speed capacity, which is to go into trimmers out, speed bar fully accelerated, hands off the brakes. You use tip steering only for that. So that's the goal. And so in this first slide here, this is the moment where Anthony is saying, I'm hitting 50 plus miles an hour. This is right when the goal of the test had been met. And then immediately after he says that, okay, this is a deformation. And you can see the deformation here completely behind him. The glider has gone from over his head to completely behind him and collapsed. And then this is the next slide where he's inbound onto the surface. And as I said, it was approximately 3 seconds from this slide to this. And as I told you guys last year, when I was, being transparent about my own crash, I had a wingtip catch a tree branch, and I was flying along maybe 5 feet off the ground. And from the moment that tree branch contacted my wing to the moment I contacted the surface wasn't but maybe a second and a half. It was just so quick. So the cause of the accident, okay, maximum speed configuration below a safe reserve elevation. That's a contributing factor. The root cause that we've all agreed on from what we can see in the footage is that he had a tension knot in one of his back lines, and that tension knot shortened the length just enough so that when he went to speed bar, it was pulling from the back as well. And it caused the glider to fold up. But it's not 100% certain. We don't have a clear shot of the tension knot. You can see something that you think could be a tension knot, but it's not like microscopic clear. Lastly, no reserve. So there's a mindset among a number of us paramotor pilots, and I have a number of close friends that have exactly this mindset, and that is reserves are only useful above 500 feet. We've had successful deployments below, but by and large, 500 feet is considered the safe elevation to get a reserve out, to throw it, and to come down under canopy. So we have people that say, I'm always flying at surface level. And I'm one of those. I mean, I prefer to be a foot off the ground, but I carry a reserve on every plane that I fly because it's too cheap not to. It's $1,000 for a reserve. Why would you not have that insurance policy? So when you think about the opportunity of prevention, okay, you see three things here, right? Of going below a safe reserve elevation to test a radical configuration on the glider. A possible miss in pre-flight, which Anthony is acquiescing, is suggesting that these are the issues. This is not. I mean, I agree with this, but this is coming from him. So on the ground here, his injuries sustained, and you watch the video. He's on the ground here for probably 5 minutes um, before first responders arrive, and this individual is just talking to him. He doesn't ever touch him. He doesn't ever help him at all. He's just keeping him awake. It's kind of tragic, in my opinion. Um, so he has a broken neck. He has a broken back. He has a compound fracture in his right arm. And, as bad as the broken neck and the broken back are, and they are bad, obviously. Anthony's right arm broke and the bone came through his jacket. So he's on the ground in trauma, in shock, and he's got a bone sticking out of his jacket. And just the horror of that. I've had fractures, but never anything with the bone sticking through the skin. I can't imagine experiencing that. So the preventive measures, okay, thorough pre-flighting, all glider components. And I'm going to tell you guys, if you go into my YouTube channel, you'll see there's a video called Brake Line Knots, where I launched with a knot in my right riser. And I have it on video, probably the first 5 minutes of the flight. It's like a harpist plucking the harp is what my right hand looks like as I'm plucking the lines, trying to route this brake handle and out through the lines and eliminate this tangle and knot. And so we all make mistakes in pre-flight. How many times have I found a gas cap on the runway down at N71? 3 times I found a gas cap. Okay. I found parts of planes out there on occasion. So we all miss stuff in pre-flight, but thorough pre-flighting captures this type of risk. Limit your testing to elevation above a hard deck, and let's just call it 2K. Let's just say we're not going to do anything below 2K that would result in the need to pull a reserve. And that would be speed testing, wing overs, SATs, any kind of radical maneuver. And carry a reserve parachute. And of course, deploy I don't mean to sound like Phil Russman here, but carry the reserve and know how to use the reserve if needed. So most thankfully, Anthony is alive and he's with us today. He's alive and well. He's out of the hospital. It's June. He's been through his recovery, all of May and June. In the weeks that followed his accident, we have another pilot in the paramotor community that's very visible. His name is Tucker Gott. Tucker did a recreation of Anthony's crash in that of the test, if you will, not the crash, but the test. And so, at an elevation of approximately 3K AGL, and after a thorough pre-flighting, Tucker took this BGD Luna 3 on full acceleration, and it performed at, I think he got 55 miles an hour out of it, and not a blurb, nothing, no problem whatsoever. BGD was very involved, the manufacturer, in assessing the aftermath of the crash. I think they actually got the wing and went through that. And so it's been determined and stated that equipment failure is not an issue here. That the Bruce Goldsmith wings are fine, they're safe, they perform as specified. So Anthony and Tucker, they debriefed before and after the testing that Tucker did, and they're friends. You can tell there's a good camaraderie with the two of them in their interviews. Anthony's accepting full responsibility for his actions, indicating that human error, is and not equipment failure is what was the issue. Now, it doesn't make us feel good at all. It makes us feel really bad because, how often do we find ourselves saying that? It's like 95% of the time we're saying we could have, should have, would have prevented that had we taken the time. So that's the closing message from today's briefing would be: have a list, have a pre-flight list that works for you, right? It doesn't have to be my list. It has to be your list, and a list that has the detail, the data, the familiarity, the thoroughness, that you check it every time before you hook in and get ready to fly, and catch these items before they become critical. As my old partner in Carolina, Charles, used to say, things don't get better in the air. So, Joe, catch this stuff before you get in the air. Yes, sir. I got it. So as Anthony, as his recovery continues to progress, he's just put this video out. I think this was last weekend. He put this one out 2 days ago, it says. But it was last weekend because I've been working on this for a while. In this video, he's conveying his decision that he's not going to fly paramotors again. And that to me is heartbreaking because he's such an awesome guy. He's an awesome pilot, and we really enjoy his content. So it's heartbreaking to see that something has happened that was preventable, that has taken one of our pilots away from us. And so, in conclusion, I'm not accepting that. Okay. I think Anthony would not surprise me if he came back on perhaps a trike and maybe a more docile, a little bit larger wing, a little less loading, and continues to fly. That would not surprise me. But as of this last week, he said that that's going to be it for him. So, speaking of that's going to be it for him, I think that's going to be it for me too, guys. That is my presentation. At Mark Honeycutt on YouTube and at Anthony Vila on YouTube are the source files for tonight's presentation. Again, I would encourage you go through Mark's 3-part series of the cross country and watch Anthony and Tucker's accident debrief. That's very informative. And with that, Rick, Gary, 748.
All right. Yeah, we do have a couple questions. So Ron asks, I see videos on Facebook of paramotors flying around above crops. Is it legal? And are you liable for the damages you might cause?
Good question. Yes, it's legal, and yes, we're liable. So, example being at Donegal Springs, if you're familiar with N71, you can look it up on SkyVector or Google Earth while I'm talking. You'll see that on the north side of the runway, I mean, literally 10 yards, it's corn. And so we've had a couple of occasions where paramotors have aborted and gone down in the corn. And in that case, what we do is we go over to the owner of the field and we self-report. and we tell him that we've had an incident, nobody's injured, we've damaged some corn. He comes and has a look at it and tells us what we owe him. And so in the 2 times I've been over there, one time it was $50, another time it was $100 because they were further into the corn, and it took 2 or 3 of us to stomp in and get them and get them out. Same with the skydivers. The skydivers will go down occasionally in the corn if they miss their mark, and they self-report and they pay the fine. As far as flying over it, common sense. Okay, you don't want to be flying over people's property if it's going to irritate them. And so I fly over property here in the valley. I tend to have visited with the farmers and know them and have asked permission. And I don't linger. So if I'm going to fly over my Amish friends' corn, I drop in, fly over the corn, and I climb out and I leave. And it's not like I'm buzzing out there in their backyard for half an hour. I came through and I'm gone. So common sense, where people are getting people angry is where they're coming close to dwellings, close to people on the ground, and lingering and repeating it. I hope that answers.
Good answer. Yeah. Jim asks, is there a life limit to the canopy, and who's responsible for deciding if it's airworthy?
Absolutely. Yes, there is a life limit, and the canopy's degradation, its enemies are number one would be the sunshine. So the canopy is constructed of ripstop nylon and mylar. And so those are very durable fabrics that if they are kept in a cool, dry place, like your closet, right, they'll last forever. But when left out in the sun, when used in the sun, the gliders tend to range 300 to 500 hours of use. Another big enemy of the glider is debris, briars, brush, anything on the pavement that would catch the wing and snag it. So conversely, where we have low UV, we have a Mac Parapilot in Alaska that has 1,000 hours on his glider and says it's like brand new because the sun is so different in Alaska. So the testing and certification is accomplished in 2 stages. One is a porosity. Well, you're doing a physical inspection and make sure that there is no rips, tears, or deformation in the glider. And those can be repaired either by taping with wing tape or with stitching fabric and the right skills. So you have the porosity test, which is to seal components of the glider and fill them with air and test the porosity, the retention. And the other is pull brake on the lines. So you load the lines up and you break them, and they're to break at a certain tensile, at a certain amount of stress. And so you have a mechanism that allows you to break the line while measuring what the number of pounds is that it took to break. You contrast that to the manufacturer's spec. If it's within tolerance, then you're good. If it's not, you replace the lines. So you can have a glider whose lines are ready for replacement for say $800, but the glider is still in perfect flying condition. And so rather than spend $4,000 for a new system, you can retrofit for 800. I know that's a lot, but hopefully that's helpful.
Very helpful. How about the reserve? And this is for me. What's the, does that have to be repacked every 6 months?
None of this is hard and fast in terms of law or a requirement, but common sense tells us reserves should be pulled and packed annually. And I'm going to admit or confess that I'm guilty of not doing that because of chain of custody. And chain of custody is that reserve has been with me in my house. I packed it myself. I installed it myself. It's never been out of my sight. And so, yeah, I've gone beyond that personally. So I confess.
Well, thanks. In keeping with the maintenance questions here, Ryan asks, what's the purpose of the hoop? You would mention that a quarter of the hoop was missing.
Yeah, the hoop, okay, so you have hoop, spars, and netting. So the hoop is the round, circular part. The spars go from the hoop down to the frame, and the netting covers that space that's created. And so what that does is that creates a physical barrier between our equipment, our body parts, and anything in flight, such as a balloon or an animal, a bird, right? So if you've got this shield around as you're penetrating the airspace, you've got a shield that prevents your throttle, your hand, or anything that you come across in the air from going through the propeller, right? So that's to keep you free from the propeller, keep you clear of the propeller. You can fly a paramotor without a hoop and without spars, but why you would think of doing that? I mean, there's nothing to keep your hand or your gear, your throttle from going through the prop. So it would be very, very risky to do that.
It makes sense. It's just hard to see. Well, I guess I can in the picture that you're showing there where the netting is, but it makes total sense.
Yeah, the netting covers from Josh's hand right here, right down to this spot right here, and all the way around. So if you're flying along and something goes in, or if your hand goes down, right, your arm is right here. If your hand goes down, you're going to feel that netting right there, and you're not going to allow your hand to go back and get into a spinning propeller.
I remember a couple years back, it was an experimental, a pusher experimental, and the fellow had lost his seat cushion, and it ended up going into the prop, and he had to
Hmm.
make an emergency landing. So it makes total sense. I'm going to
Hmm.
jump around a little bit with the questions here. What's the typical or average life of a canopy in lines? And Mitchell asked that question.
So again, it's three to 500 hours, and you figure if you are like really aggressive and after it every week, you might get 100 hours a year. And you look at, I've been flying almost 10 years now, and I've just hit 800 hours, and that's all I do. I mean, every time it's good, I'm out flying. So it takes a long time to wear out a glider. Probably 3 years would be, and in a 3 year time frame, if you're after it all the time, you will probably experience the full breadth of flight characteristics that a given glider will have, and you'll want to move to another one. You want to move to something that's different in a way that fits your personality and your style. And most people go to smaller, a little smaller, and a little more responsive in the turns, if you will.
Interesting. So the different packs and different
Oh,
canopies
oh
fly
yeah.
differently. Hmm.
Yeah, the 28-meter glider is like the oil tanker going across the ocean. Okay. The 18-meter glider is like the F-18. It's literally that much difference. Real slow turner, really just chugging along versus wow, I just tapped the control and I'm at a 45 to the surface. Just like that. So
All right.
we like so all of our younger pilots like the smaller gliders, and all of our military pilots just that's where they want to be.
Mike is asking, what airspace are you prohibited from flying in? Or I should ask then, I guess, what airspace can you fly in?
Class G golf.
Go
G
anywhere airspace, huh?
G for good. In fact, Jeff Goen, our former USPPA president, in talking about airspace for paramotors, he likes to use this illustration. He says, if you were to take a dart and stand blindfolded in front of a map of the United States and throw that dart blindfolded, 9 times out of 10, you're going to hit Class G airspace. The majority of the United States, especially west of the Mississippi, is Class G. It gets really complex here in the Northeast, and especially as you get closer to DC, Baltimore, New York. I mean, we've had since we've had the current president sitting, we've had swaths of airspace just with any sitting president. Wherever they go for their weekends, that whoever's running a flight school there goes out of business for 4 years because they can't, we're not doing anything down Rehoboth or whatever in Delaware, right? Whereas before it was down Mar-a-Lago in Florida, nothing down in Florida. So yeah, TFRs shut down the airspace. But again, if you're willing to take a drive, you can always find Class G without any restrictions.
And a good comment there. Check for TFRs before you launch.
Absolutely.
Jen, who was a fixed wing pilot, asks, what's your typical pattern altitude at an airport? And do you fly a different pattern than an aircraft or than a
Yes.
fixed wing, I should say?
Yes. Yeah. In fact, at Donegal, what we have agreed to is that Donegal flies a left hand. I want to say it's 12, between 12 and 14 pattern. And so we fly right hand off to the north at or below 200. So we're opposite the GA pattern and at a fraction of their elevation. And oh, by the way, as soon as GA comes into the area, we squawk and let them know we're here and that we have visual, and we announce our position vis-a-vis the field. We're holding on the north side of the runway at 200 feet, and we're going to wait until you're clear of the active before we even enter the space. And so, using that methodology, we're able to closely coordinate and sequence our departures and approaches with fixed wing. In fact, it's frequent that we'll fly the parallel departure and film for the jump club because we work closely with them.
And I have to say, I've personally flown at Donegal Springs a number of times, and I've had no conflicts with any other traffic.
No, no, no.
Oh,
At our busiest, we've had itinerant aircraft. We've had multiple jump club aircraft, like 3 aircraft flying skydivers, a hot air balloon, and half a dozen paramotors. And everything works just like a military operation. We're all on 228, and we have specific protocols if we're on the ground or on approach that we do not bring our gliders up, right? If we're preparing to launch and a plane is either on approach or departure, we leave the glider on the ground. And so so that the pilots departing and approaching never have to be concerned that some numbskull is going to do something on the ground that's going to get in their way. And we let them know if they're on approach or departure, we let them know we're going to just take a knee here and stay on the ground until you're clear of the runway. And by having active, limited communication, it keeps everyone aware of presence and intent. And as long as you're consistent with that and persistent with that, intentional, there's no reason you can't cooperate. I mean, sometimes it's tight. Sometimes we've got jump planes leaving literally every 5 minutes because we have 3 planes. So you think of a 15-minute turn, there's always one coming, always one going. And if we've got 3 or 4 paramotor pilots that are wanting to take off, we sometimes we have to wait. And so we'll be hooked up and ready to go, and we just wait 5 more minutes and then go. So, and of course we have a great owner operator. Ben Travis is awesome. And he's worked very closely with us for the last 8 years, and helped us to establish a protocol. We have a written protocol I've shared with a team here before, written and a visual, and it's rather detailed. And happy to make that available to anybody that wants. I can email it to you. But yeah, that's the key to success, is having the protocol and ensuring that everyone follows that protocol. And one key element of the protocol is that no beginners. If you're a beginner and you want to fly at Donegal Springs, you have to fly under the supervision of an instructor. So in order to go down and fly independently, you have to be a level 2 pilot, PBG 2 pilot, 25 or more flights. You have to have insurance, and you have to have a transceiver and a helmet, obviously. So if you're safe, you're equipped, you know what you're doing, we're glad to have you. We've got a spot for you. And if not, we'll help you get there. Right? We'll train you to and equip you to get you there.
right. And that knocks out a couple more questions with what you just said there. Awesome. Let's see what else we have. What's the most common surface used for takeoff and landing?
Well, I think that if you look behind me here, that this is the most desirable surface would be fresh cut, short, dry grass. Okay, that would be the best, because grass doesn't restrict your glider. Grass doesn't hold your glider on the ground. Whereas if you're on dirt, right, and there's twigs and stubble and perhaps some gravel and stuff, that stuff can impede the glider from coming up. So ideally the grass, but unfortunately here in PA, the grass is always wet in the morning. So we launch off of this, off the turnout, and then we land short of the turnout and walk onto it and lay the glider down on the dry concrete.
I think we covered this question, but is an inspection required for the paramotor and how
It, it's
frequent?
it's not required, but if you are an airplane mechanic or an airplane pilot and you want to fly, then you either have a mechanic or become one. Because regardless of the FAR 103 absence of a physical inspection requirement, pardon me, FAR 103 says we're not subject to inspection. However, we must submit if requested. So if Gary or Rick were to call me up and say, "Hey, I want to come over and inspect the paramotors at Donald Springs," we would say, "Absolutely, come on, and let's walk through them." And what we would look at is our assembly. We would look at the quality of the materials. Are the materials of the frame, the airframe, are they deteriorating? Are they damaged? Are they dirty? Right? What does a cylinder head interior look like? What's our piston looking like? What's the plug look like? What's the fuel air mixture? So there are tons of I would say inspection points that we do every flight as individual pilots. So no, the FAA is not coming out and doing that. We're doing it ourselves. So checking the plug always and making sure we've got a good clean burn, because with a two-stroke engine, that's your thermometer. And if your plug is going white and dry, you're running way hot and you could blow your engine up. And people do that from poor fuel air mixture. Conversely, if your plug is wet and you've got blue smoke coming out of your system, well, you've got too much going in. You need to lean it out. So fortunately, you're only dealing with one cylinder, one plug, one coil, one carb. So dialing these things in typically doesn't take more than about 10 minutes.
Awesome questions here that people are writing. And what apps do most people use for navigation, weather, logbook, etc.?
Well, Fly Sky High is probably very very common. Fly is another one. Fly Sky High is a iOS application. Fly is a Garmin application. So I find that it really maps the navigation and accessory tools map to the pilot's personality. So you can carry everything you need in a Garmin satellite watch. That is, altitude, heading, speed, distance traveled, right? And duration of the flight. All that's in one screen on the Garmin. Okay. There are all sorts of secondary devices that you can purchase. Um, I have, I'm going to say, four different GPSs. Flymaster GPS. I've got two different Garmin GPSs and a Garmin watch. And I put them all on the flight deck and I play with different ones and try not to be too distracted. Um, each one has its pros and cons. So it's a matter of finding a device that you like. I like these Garmin Fortrex devices because you can mark waypoints in them. Then you can select go to the waypoint. And so I'll put a waypoint of Keller Brothers in at Donegal Springs, and it'll tell me, okay, it's 14 miles over there. It's going to take you X minutes, and you'll arrive at this time. That's pretty cool. I like to have that. Whereas the Flymaster GPS, super accurate with altitude to like the split second. It tells me altitude and speed, but it doesn't give me waypoints. So, really it's a matter of just finding out what the three things we need most of all are: altitude, speed, and heading. Right. And those are, you can get that at REI for $20 and a little barometric altitude indicator.
It works.
Yeah.
Um, Got to be questions from paramotor people here. What's the most common engine used in paramotors?
That's
And do you worry about ethanol?
Okay, good. Both good questions. I think the most popular manufacturer for some years now has been the Italian brand Vitarazi, and Vitarazi has several different engines that they are manufacturing. Um, they are an 80 cc class, a 185 cc class, which is the most common, and then they've got a big boy 300 plus cc I want to say it's called Cosmo or Cosmos. And that would be for like trikes, for wheeled. Um, so Viterazzi's very popular. Corsair is also very popular, another Italian manufacturer, as is the Polish manufacturer that goes through France, which is called Air Conception. And they use an aluminum cast engine, which is the weight ratio is incredible. It's like 44 pounds dry with 175 pounds of thrust. So that's what I fly personally. And it's got an electric starter, which makes it really super easy. You just put it on your back and push the button as opposed to pull, pull, pull. Um, Now, with regards to ethanol, I came from California and non-ethanol fuel is not available in California. Everything has ethanol. And as a result, during my first, half a dozen years of flying, I would get all sorts of carburetor and fuel line issues from the ethanol buildup. In particular, on the Walboro WG8 and 37 carbs, there's a little trap about the size of your pinky fingernail. And that little trap is the last stage before going into the main chamber. And that little trap would get filled with what I called ethanol boogers. And it's like you're flying along at 8,500 RPM, and all of a sudden you drop to 68, and you didn't do anything. You didn't let off the throttle at all. You're still got a handful, and you're not going above 68. You get down, you pull that carburetor apart, and you get a needle in there, and you find out that little screen is full of ethanol goo. And all you got to do is just take it out like you would your kid's nose, right? Suction it out and then be on your way. So here in PA, we're stoked. We have Sheets, and Sheets has ethanol free fuel. I think it's 90 or 91 octane, and it's $5 a gallon. That's what it costs to fly for an hour, $5. So that's all that ever touches my paramotor is ethanol free from Sheets.
Safety first.
Yeah.
So Robert asks, how does the chute respond to thermals, both rising and falling?
Well, good question. And hopefully the most of us don't experience that because thermals happen out of the window that we fly. We tend to fly the first 2 and the last 2 hours of the day. So if we exceed that, we will experience thermals. And at Donegal Springs, because of all the crops out there, you could see the thermic activity. It's very, very visible as you look across the field. All you have to do is just squint a little bit and you can see it shimmering. You can see the thermic activity coming up. So in terms of impact, right, it makes for same thing as with a fixed wing. It makes for a very bumpy ride. And as soon as you climb out and climb up, typically the thermals are not extending beyond probably 1,500, 2,000 max for sure. So, if we have a thermic morning, we just get up higher, right? And it's smooth and fine at 2,000. And then when you're coming in for landing, you will get bumped and bounced around. That's not such a big deal, right? The thermal uplift is not such a big deal. The thermal sink, right, where you get suck and sink, the sink can be a bit of a challenge because you can be flying along at 20 feet and all of a sudden it drops you to 8. And you have to be cognizant of that condition, and you have to have your engine, what we call spooled and ready. So with a two-stroke engine, there's an idle speed, then there's a full speed, and then there's a speed that's neither. It's not idle, it's not full, it's spooled. It's like midway on the tachometer. So if you're looking at 9K as the top end, your spool would probably be around 4,000. And at 4,000, it's not whining, but it's ready to go so that if you have that sink at 20 feet, all you have to do is just apply a little bit of throttle and it'll level you right out or climb you up if needed, right? So you respond to that with the equipment input and offset the issue.
Oh, if you're okay on time, and I'm asking you if you are, we have three more questions. Are you good?
Yeah, you bet.
Oh, awesome. Okay. So, is there any source of liability insurance other than the one that requires both US UA and US PPA membership and costs 600 per year?
Well, okay. So now you've. I'm going to turn the camera back on so you just look at you in the eyes on this one. I'm an old insurance guy. Okay. I got decades in healthcare insurance. Okay. Both on the hospital side and the HMO side and the pharmacy side. So I know insurance very well. What I am challenged about when I explore the paramotor insurance options is that there is no risk pool. So I've actually engaged with O2 Oxygen in exploring, because they're offered through USPBA, exploring how does your system work? Okay, if you're charging, and I think O2 when I made this examination, it's 350 for the year. Okay, so $350 for the premium for a $500,000 policy. So my first question is, how many policies have you written? And they're like, well, we've got 200 active policies. Okay, 200 active policies at 350 apiece. What does that tell us about risk pool? And you've got a $500,000 max that you're going to pay on a claim. How many claims have you paid? Now, we're not going to make that information available to you, sir. Do you have any claims data that you can share with me? No, we can't share any of that information with you, sir. Well, tell me about your parent company. So they tell me about the parent company. I go start digging into the parent company. They have nothing for aviation. So, I'm not saying this to disparage or discredit O2. I'm just sharing the experience I had in examining one company's offerings. And that is, the company did not have sufficient policies written to cover the risk. And so, like, I'm working at Cigna Health Plan. We've got 30 million people in the plan. Okay. If somebody has cancer, well, that's paid for right through the premiums. We have 30 million people in the plan. So you think if we only have a couple hundred policies written, how are you going to provide, the risk pool for $500,000 claims? It's just, I don't see it. And at the same time, you look at paramotor crashes, the historic paramotor crashes, including the ones that are debilitating and fatal. Virtually none of them have any secondary damage. There are no buildings burning up. There are no homes destroyed. There are no secondary lives taken on the ground because of the paramotor crash. So when I waiver folks into my program for ARX PPG, I have liability wrap on my business and so forth. But I explained very clearly, as it was explained to me by the USPPA, that your insurance as a student, as the pilot in command, your insurance is the insurance that you're counting on. Okay. Nobody's going to insure you for what you do in the airplane, right? That's your responsibility. Your pilot in command, I won't take people into the program that do not have current active comprehensive medical insurance. So, that the worst thing that happens in this has happened to me. I fell down and broke my back walking the paramotor off the field. I clipped my wing with a tree and broke my shoulder and my hip. Okay. My Blue Cross paid for all that. I never expected the landowner to do anything for me. So I don't know if that's answering your question, but there is no Cigna, there is no Blue Cross, there is no United for paramotor. And if you find one, please let me know. I'd love to hear how they do it.
Thanks for that. Jeremy asks, how would I get into powered paragliding?
Jeremy, you already know how to get into powered paragliding. You've been doing it for 10 years. How you would do it is if you're coming through, if you're local and you want to come through AirX, go to airxppg.com, fill out a contact form, and leave your wallet at home, and come out and meet some people that are doing the sport. Meet this crew here, right? And talk to these folks that are actually strapping these systems on their back and running into the air, and let them tell you about their experience and see if you see in yourself what you see in these other folks, because this is not like fixed wing aviation, where if you roll up to Keller Brothers and you engage with John over there, if he's still over there, John Seibel, and John looks at you and says, yeah, you're an intelligent individual, and you can fit into the airplane. Yeah, we can get you through the program and you can learn to fly. Well, that's not the case with paramotor. With paramotor, there's a physical aspect. It's a huge physical overhead. And you can see there's a thread here between these guys. Look at their shape, look at their age, look at their height. Okay. So you can't be underweight, you can't be overweight, you can't be too tall, you can't be too short. Right. So all of that factors into, do you have the build type, and do you have the strength, the core strength, the endurance to get out here and run around with these things until you learn. Once you've learned how to do it, actual execution to fly is 15, 20 minutes of exertion per flight of setup and breakdown. But when you're training, you can be exerting yourself to the point of exhaustion every session you go out. So you really need to have good core strength, good agility and flexibility. Um, and of course, the age. I mean, you guys look at me, I'm an old man. And when I learned, I was in my mid 50s. And I was really, really disappointed because the guys in their mid 20s in my class were running circles around me. They were so much better and so much faster. And as I became an instructor and taught both old and young, I learned it's old people learn at a different pace. So if you're like me, if you're older, if you're over 50, prepare yourself for a longer training experience versus if you're in your 20s, like this guy right here, he's a jump club guy, Josh on the, there's my pointer here, Josh on the left. I think Josh, he had probably 3,000 jumps under his belt when he started paramotor. So he already knew how to kite. He knew how to land. Now he had thousands of landings under his belt. Getting him into paramotor was just teaching him how to fly that aircraft. It was 2 days and he was ready to go. Conversely, I've had guys my age that have taken 10 weeks and lots of coaching to give them the emotional and mental state and confidence to actually pull the trigger and execute.
One last question from me.
Yeah.
Is the sport growing?
I don't think so. I think we've kind of plateaued, and this is something I've been watching for years. When you look at the price of entry, the price of entry into paramotor is about the same as buying a dirt bike and a trailer and all the dirt bike riding gear and comms and stuff, or buying a Harley Cruiser, right? Or buying a Sea-Doo or a jet ski. You spend 15 grand by the time you get all this together. So there's so many other activities competing for that 15 grand. And plus, this is one that most certainly will take you away from your family. So if you're a young married and you have kids, and you're thinking about, well, I'm gonna get out of bed and say bye to my wife and kids at 5 in the morning so I can go fly, or I'm gonna miss dinner and the kids' baseball game so I can go fly. No, don't do that. Wait till your kids grown up and then learn how to do it. So
All right. That's it for the questions, and awesome questions. I want to thank everybody who sent in a question.
yeah, thanks a
Special
lot.
thanks to you, Joe. Very much appreciate you presenting. We have the recording that we made back in March, I believe it was, on powered paragliding. And we
Good.
try and do two or three of these presentations annually. And thank you for doing that. Would you like to take a moment and share your closing thoughts?
Yeah, I just think in the last one we do this year, or the next one we do this year, I'd love if we could do it out at the airfield. And when we first started these presentations before COVID, John and I were able to do one out at Keller Brothers, and we had a breakfast. We had it right there in Dan's hangar. We had a breakfast brought in, and we did a flight demonstration, so everybody got to see the gear and got to see it in flight. People got to try the gear on and play with it and stuff. And it's I'd love to do that. I'd love to get us out to N71. Ben will let us work with him, and I'd like to do one out there and get everybody back together.
That would be awesome. Yeah, and you shot me down because I'm 6'7". You said the tall guys are out.
I know you can do it. You can absolutely do it. Yeah.
Thank you again, Joe. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for everybody for attending. It's been awesome. I appreciate it.
I have just a couple of slides here talking about the Wings program. So those of you familiar with the Wings program, you can sign off now. And thanks for viewing the presentation. Your Wings credit is going to be issued. If you're new to Wings and want to hear a little bit more about it, just a couple of slides and we'll be done. When I introduced Joe, I said he was a FAA safety team rep, meaning he's interested in promoting safety, and he donates his time and talents freely on behalf of the FAST team. In the interest of safety, which is why we're here tonight, why we're putting on the presentation, I'm going to play a short video explaining what the WINGS program is all about. We believe participating in the WINGS program provides safer skies, fewer accidents, and more lives saved.
When you put a family member aboard an airline flight, you expect that flight crew to be red-hot proficient and that your family member will be safe. After all, those pilots have had mandatory simulator training within the past few months. So why then, when we take a friend or family member flying, do we not demand the same level of proficiency of ourselves? Kind of crazy, right? Using the FAA's WINGS program can help, and it serves as a flight review. 57 seconds starts right now. WINGS, the FAA's pilot proficiency program, combines continuing education through courses and seminars with periodic flight training with an instructor. After registering at FAAsafety.gov, the My WINGS page populates with flight lessons tailored to your certification profile. Choose these or search for other options. Open and print the task list and fly with a current flight instructor whose job it is to hold you to the task completion standards. But remember, this is training, not a check ride. You cannot fail it. Instead, you work towards proficiency. After the flight, the instructor validates the credit online in your profile. After the successful completion of 3 flight credits and 3 knowledge credits, you will have completed a phase of WINGS and you'll get credit for a flight review, and with it, possibly a break on your aircraft insurance. This consistency in training helps general aviation pilots stay proficient. Now you can fly your family and friends with greater confidence that you're again at a high level of proficiency. We often find many pilots are eager to attend webinars, courses, or in-person seminars, but not so eager to get into an airplane or helicopter with an instructor holding a task list. However, opting for a flight review is often settling for just the basic currency requirements. Try to hold yourself to the same standards of proficiency that you would expect of the airline pilots who fly your family. For the FAST team, I'm Phil Dixon.
10 grand is given away each year. Complete WINGS phases and win cash awards. After you complete a phase of WINGS, both the airman and the CFI can enter the sweepstakes. How do you enter? After completing a phase of WINGS, you go to FAAsafety.gov, click on My WINGS, Pilots, or if this claim rewards is illuminated, click on it, and it will take you to this page right here, and there'll be a box to check, and then you fill in your information. And that's FAAsafety.gov, Pilots, My WINGS, or you click on Claim Rewards. We hope you enjoyed tonight's presentation, and if you have a topic or suggestion for a webinar, my email address is on the next slide. Drop me a line. On behalf of myself, Gary Martin, Jim Logie, and our presenter, special thanks to Mr. Joe Hall. Thanks for joining us tonight. Be well, fly safe, and have a wonderful 4th of July. Our contact information, as I had promised. Again, I'll leave it up for a moment or two. Good night, everybody.